Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company. Today, I'm thrilled to be talking about the fantastic movie Tuesday. We are joined today by writer and director Daina Oniunas-Pusić, along with cast member Lola Petticrew. And Daina, starting with you, I wanted to talk about the emotional landscape of this film because I love all of the emotional complexities of not just a mother-daughter relationship, but the idea of loss and processing grief even before you lose someone. And so it allows these characters to be so complicated and angry and frustrated, but also heartfelt and vulnerable with each other. And I was
Mm.
just interested in the experience of writing and directing a film which covers so much of the emotional landscape of people.
Well, it was very emotional for me writing it as well. I call it method writing because I have to sort of feel and think everything that the characters are thinking and feeling so that I can feel out what they're going to do next. And it was a very intense experience for me to write it as well. And I I really enjoy taking characters to very, very difficult places. What's that thing where you put a character up a tree and you throw rocks at it. You throw rocks at them. And so I think creating complicated characters and complex characters that have you know so, that are not necessarily always good guys was also very exciting for me. I think it would be safe to say that Julia's character at the beginning of the film is almost a villain,
Mm.
and then gradually becomes the hero of the film. So all of that was very exciting for me, and even more exciting was to find people who could embody that and do that and go on that journey with me.
Right. And Lola, I feel like you and Julia do such a fantastic job at capturing all the complexities of your characters' relationship with each other in that vein. And I was interested in how you kind of said about preparing to play a character where there's so many emotions involved in it and the stakes are so high and so real.
I think it's about, having like a very deep knowledge of them and their history and preparation. We spent like a very long time preparing the character and getting to know her and understand her. I mean, it's all there really in the script. It's sort of about dissecting it and finding it and understanding her history and her life. And then that means that, you have like a well of truth to sort of dig from, and things will happen naturally and a lot of times without you even realizing. Um, so yeah, I mean, and also like a massive part of that is the performances of Julia and Dorinze. And I was just so grateful to be surrounded by such an amazing team. Yeah.
It's so wonderful. And Dinah, I also wanted to talk about the visual effects team that you worked with Mike Stillwell and Andrew Simmons in developing Death, because it's such a beautifully constructed image on screen. But also there's so many things that you do with Death in kind of changing the size and changing the scope of what it looks like throughout the film. And so I was interested in how you kind of mapped out the original image of Death with them, and then how you thought about all of the different movement and shapes.
Well, I spent a lot of time preparing with the visual effects team. I think I spent over a year in very detailed scene specific preparation with the visual effects team, going through every single scene and Death's behavior, movement in every single scene, and uh, what he was meant to sort of experience as a character emotionally, but also what he was meant to do physically in the film really informed how he was designed. So, yes, he's a parrot, but he's pushed into something a little bit different. He's a monster, really. And it was always, I had a couple of things that I knew that needed to happen. First, that he couldn't just be a parrot because it would make the visual effects less believable, because the audience member has a reference to what a parrot actually looks like, and they don't really have a frame of reference for what a monster parrot looks like. So they're more likely to believe something that's not real. Um, and also that, uh, you know, we really had to morph the character both physically and emotionally in the visual effects, but especially physically, obviously in the visual effects, to what he was supposed to do. So, for instance, like he moves like a parrot, but sometimes he moves like a dinosaur. He runs, specifically an Ornithomimus dinosaur. He runs in a very specific way. He moves, and so all of that informed how his skeletal structure was built, the proportions of his face in regards to his body, his beak, his eyes. There was just so much thought put into how this character worked, and all of that came together in then Arinze Kene's performance, who who played Death in the film, and he was, in front of the camera in the scenes with the other actors performing in all the scenes, and then the VFX animators animated directly over him in post-production. So any movement, any micro movement you see the character do, that's all Arinze. They're simply translating the performance into the creature. I should say his voice is also completely undoctored. So it's a really powerful performance. And things got very creative when he changed his size, because Arinze could do human-sized and he could do even child-sized. But once it got to 20 centimeters, 3 centimeters, I mean, he's a very talented actor, but he just couldn't do it.
He just couldn't shrink.
He couldn't do it. So, we got very creative scene specific. Sometimes the human actors would perform across a monitor with a live feed of Arinze's performance, and they would hear him, or sometimes he would puppeteer his own character, or sometimes he would be like an earpiece, specifically in Lola's ear, talking to her, and then we would create the earpiece and VFX. So we did everything we could to put Arinze in front of the camera to base the visual effects off of his performance. It was very exciting. I could talk about it for a long time, so you should just interrupt me.
I know, I feel like I could listen to it for 3 hours, but there's so much else in the film as well. I mean, Lola, it's so interesting hearing those details of the way that you and Arinze were able to work together on those scenes, because there's so many impactful moments that your character shares with Death. And so how did the practical elements that Daina was putting together for you really help in landing a lot of those moments with each other?
Having Arinze perform with me on the day was absolutely paramount. I mean, he's such an incredible performer, such a given performer. Physically, what he can do is really unbelievable, but he's such a truthful person and has an incredibly deep, deep, deep well of emotion to pull from. And he is able to be both incredibly human and also incredibly fantastical as a person, and that definitely massively changed the performance and grounded everything in truth. And I think that's what's great about this film, is as much as there's this fantastical fantasy element, everything about it is so rooted in quite big universal truths.
I love that. And for both of you as well, with Tuesday, we don't necessarily need all the details and a full medical history, but we know exactly what's going on. And I loved the use of breath work throughout the film for the character, and even just the fact that Tuesday will tell other people, just breathe, just breathe. And it's something that they're telling other people because it's something that they're struggling with so much. And then even just moments where the sound design really heightens, that struggle with just taking a small breath and how much pain it causes every single day. And I was interested for both of you in how you said about really using just the idea of breathing to communicate so much about what this character is going through.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for noticing that. It's definitely something we did and we spoke about from very early on, and balancing energy levels, which, when a lot of this crazy stuff is happening around you, it's important to balance where somebody going through these things physically, where their energy levels and breath might be. It's hard. Your body sometimes can't tell what's real and what's not real. So I found like a lot going into a lot of the hyperventilating, my body didn't know that it wasn't in danger and that wasn't real, and could sometimes be tricked into having a bit of a panic. And we definitely mapped it out. We spoke a lot before every scene about where energy levels would be, where the breath would be, and where that sits in the body really informs a lot emotionally.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the breath for me was one of the most important things.
It's incredibly important, and you notice that it's accentuated in the sound design as well. What's behind it is also this ability to be present in the present moment and to experience the present moment as it is. I think that's very relevant for anyone these days. We are ripped into so many different roles, so many different places at the same time. And it made a lot of sense for me that someone who is in the position that Tuesday is in and is also often in a kind of very vulnerable situation that could provoke a lot of panic, that she would ground herself in that way and understand, the importance of being in the moment and being present and not, necessarily giving much weight to the past or the future. I think that's what gives her a lot of courage. I know it does I mean, obviously I'm speaking from personal experience.
Yeah, we sometimes called it the rod. And I think what we were really talking about a lot of the times was the breath and Tuesday's ability to like anchor herself in order to anchor her mum and buoy her mum in everything that's happening. She really has to center herself and go into like a really meditative place sometimes.
Yes, and I think, if this is a, good continuation of the answer, I feel like there are a lot of similarities between Tuesday the character and Lola the actor. And one of those similarities is that they are, although both characters are very, or both people are very tough, tough characters, they both feel an enormous amount, just feel what other people are feeling, have a great sense of empathy, whether they want to or not. I think sometimes Lola felt that maybe they didn't want to feel every single thing that was going on. And that was really beautiful to watch because the two were enmeshed in that way.
I love that. And, also off the back of that, Lola, I was thinking about the way that Tuesday also just really holds a lot of other people's emotions. There's so many conversations that Tuesday's wanted to have with their mom that, their mom's not ready to have. And so instead of pushing it, they've kept it on the back burner as well, until they're forced to confront it with death showing up. And I was interested in kind of how you looked at this arc of a character who's so used to creating space and comfort for everyone else around them, but going through this journey over the course of a couple of days of needing to take the space for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably happens to a lot more people than we think, that, when something is going on, if they're ill, like a lot of times people are just super worried about the people around them and making sure that they're okay. And, for the age that Tuesday is, she has this incredible ability to like center herself and hold that space for her mum. Even though I think ultimately all she really wants is to be hugged and held and told that she's going to be okay and that, her mum is going to be okay. Because I think she's at a point where she can accept it, but that last step is her mother being able to accept it. It's such an incredible ability to have as a child, and it's a real role reversal. But I think it will speak to a lot of people. I think that oftentimes happens with kids when they sometimes accidentally are parentified.
Definitely agree. And, off the back of that, Dinah, I wanted to talk a little bit about Zora's journey that she goes on in terms of being in that space of not being ready to confront the idea of losing her daughter, and that sense of what will my self identity be, because so much of my life has been wrapped up in all of this. And even kind of later in the film, kind of touching upon spoilers, when they enact death's passage themselves, and she's like, this is great, we're so good at this, we could do this full time together, and it's still not sinking in. Yeah. I was curious about kind of how you found the beats of where you wanted her to gradually accept it, because even in the face of loss, it still takes her time towards the end of the movie as well.
I think, that's very well spotted. She is a character. She is someone who's taken care of a very ill child for the past 14 years of her life, which has meant that she's incredibly focused, and her life mission is to keep her child alive and to keep the two of them afloat. And that focus gives her a huge amount of energy and strength and power, but it also gives her a type of tunnel vision, which means that when the time comes for her to be there for her child, to help her go through that, she can't do that at all, to the point where she's ignoring her child's phone calls. That's what I mean by villain. She is in complete denial. And what you really see is someone going through the stages of grief. You see someone in, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, depression. That's what you see. Although she does spend most of the film in anger, which is fun. And it brings out a lot of the sort of manic comic quality that Julia brings to the character. But in terms of finding the beats, it was really following that journey of grief and thinking about, the character's history and how resistant they would be to that acceptance. Like you said, it's so absurd. She's on that beach. She's like, you know what? I think I could be death. And that is more acceptable for her than what actually happens. So in a way, we were talking about Tuesday's character. I would definitely describe it as a kid teaching her mother how to love her enough to help her in that way, to let her go, because in a way it is a growth of love.
I know, and it also makes me think a little bit more about Tuesday's relationship with death as well, which I wanted to ask both of you about, because there's such an immediate connectivity and understanding in the two. Death doesn't have a physical voice at the beginning and nobody's talked to death for years and years, and similarly for Tuesday, it's, there's conversations, but it's all about the day to day and how are you feeling physically. It's not about the emotional well-being of the character. And so I was curious in kind of how the two of you saw so many similarities and parallels and what connects them instantly.
Death and Tuesday.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they're both, Tuesday is someone who gets more and more extraordinary and more particular and peculiar the more about, about the character. And that is what draws death into that situation. Mm-hmm. But also, I think there's similarities in how, frankly, like how much pain they're in. They connect through the fact that being in the present moment, taking the time that they have together to hang out and listen to music and smoke pot, all the things that they do, that is something that is able to take them out of their pain, their everyday experience of pain and loss. And that's what comes across in the Ice Cube song, which is Today Was a Good Day, or a good day, the theme song of the film. And when they talk about that song, they connect through it because, as they say, that it's a good day is just a day without that pain and suffering.
And I think like as well, not only do they both have their own pain, but they both hold so much space for other people's pain.
Yeah.
And both really wish to relinquish that. Mm-hmm. And I think that definitely creates like an instant kinship between them.
I really like that. I always thought it was really fun when there's a scene when they're talking and they almost get competitive about who has it worse.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, my mother doesn't love me. And he imitates. He's like, maybe they doesn't. And they sort of, they try to one up each other about who has it worse. And I just loved the way that you guys played that, because it sort of took the tragedy, they witnessed the tragedy of each other and then made fun of it together. Mm-hmm. And it sort of made it more bearable, mm-hmm. and hopeful.
It's such a great moment. And I love that you're bringing up as well when the two of them are just smoking pot in a bedroom and listening to Ice Cube. And Lola, just wanted to ask you about filming sequences like that with the Renze, because it's such a different space to a lot of the rest of the film.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that was great. Like we were in, the studio in Tuesday's bedroom, and yeah, Renze and I just like hit like a vape and danced in the room and like put the song on, and like Arinze's got like great moves, so I was just reacting to what was happening.
I love when you get to that point in the film. I have to say, like, that is a point in the film where I get very proud, because you watch the scene and you're sort of like, wow, this is, it's really heartfelt and enjoyable. You're happy that the characters are connecting, but you're also going, what am I watching?
Yeah.
And the fact that we could get the film to that point naturally, where, audience members would be like, oh, of course they're connecting. Oh, of course they're dancing. Oh, of course, that's always a point of pride for me that we were able to do that.
I mean, you bring that up, and I loved how many moments throughout the film it just completely circumvents your expectations of what you think it's going to be based on the idea of, a mother and a daughter and loss. And, one of the moments I remember being so resonant in the cinema was when Zora eats death to try and make it disappear. And, were you thinking about the idea of wanting to kind of circumvent the idea? Because I feel like this film just does so many different things than a lot of movies exploring the same themes have done in the past.
Well, generally, when I write or think about making anything, my main concern is, am I being genuine in every single moment that I'm thinking about it? Is it really what I'm thinking and feeling? It sounds like a truism, but it's actually pretty hard. I've spent years training myself to think in that way. And when you write in that way and approach a film like that, you don't really have to think about whether or not it's going to be whether it's going to fulfill an expectation or not, or is it going to be original or not, because each and every one of us is an original thinker. We just have to have the persistency to insist on it. And once you do that, then it just automatically is unexpected and different, because everyone's mind in a way works like that. I think.
And Lola, I was curious about working with Julia and filming the scenes where essentially they're saying what they know is their last goodbye to each other, because I also liked that it wasn't kind of overly sentimental. It still felt so real and so true to the relationship that we've seen up until that point with the two of them. And so what felt really important to you to make sure that you were bringing to the table for Tuesday as a character in that moment?
I think that just goes back to like preparation, about like knowing these people and this relationship inside out. The guidance of Daina, who, was really there to like move and manipulate us into these places at all times. Like, and, I think we certainly had like such a wealth of understanding of these characters that, there were multiple ways that we could have played those things, and they all would have been truthful. But it was, finding the right one for this film and what we were trying to say. And, ultimately, I think in the end, it's an incredibly hopeful piece and actually quite a joyous piece. So I think that's sort of where we landed.
Yeah. And just stripping, sometimes the scenes would just need to be stripped down to the bare minimum of what they were actually saying. That last scene that you mentioned, I think originally had a little bit more dialogue. And we just it was just so intense. And Lola and Julia were both, obviously very emotional. And we just kept stripping it back until finally we reached the point where we just said, well, she just wants to tell her mother that she loves her more than anything, so much. And it's actually the first time in the film that they say that they love each other, which I was very careful to not overdo in the film. I didn't want them to say or verbalize their love for each other. And that's the only time when they say it. So, like you say, it was very important for us to understand who the characters are, what they're thinking, to be able to do that even.
Yeah. And in the end, I think it becomes like an act of like radical acceptance and love. And so in that moment, as emotional as it is, Tuesday's been holding on for a very, very long time for her mother. And I think she's ready to go. And, Zora maybe isn't ready to let her go, but is certainly ready to do what is best for her daughter. And so I think in the end, it becomes this really beautiful act of radical acceptance in both their parts. That's really beautiful.
And it's such a great point that it's not that she's necessarily even ready at that point. And so Daina, within that, I was interested in kind of like that last segment of the film. If in writing it, you always had the idea that you wanted to show her character's experience after she says goodbye to her daughter, because, it kind of shows that death isn't suddenly neatly everything being wrapped up in a bow just because they were able to sit there and say, I love you at the end. We get to see her character go through that feeling of, I would rather be dead and be with my daughter than be here right now, but also then just gradually learning how to put one foot in front of the other.
Yes, there's a shift in perspective during the film. It sort of starts off from Death's perspective and then moves on to Tuesday's perspective and ultimately becomes Zora's film. It becomes her journey. So it made sense that it would end with her, like I said, that with her sort of ending of that grief process of accepting what has happened and accepting the reality of her situation. So that always felt like the right ending. And like you say, I mean, it wouldn't have felt right to end it with Tuesday passing. It didn't feel like that was the point of the film, because Tuesday's motivation was to get her mother to a point where she would survive. And that's not really a sure thing until the very end, where she just goes, get up, woman, and go. Yeah.
And there's so many moments between the two of them as well, where there's the conversation that they're having and what they really mean in their words. I mean, I even love that point later in the film with the two of them where Zora says, let's get you home. And it's a double meaning. It's not we're physically going home. It's like the home that you're ultimately going to. And so for both of you, I just wanted to ask about getting to write and getting to play dialogue where there's always this beautiful double meaning underneath everything.
You wrote the thing.
Again, I think it just goes back to how do you genuinely feel that people speak? My feeling is always that people say what they want the other person to think. They think something else, and the truth is usually in their action, how they move through a scene or what they choose to do. And that is an elegant way to avoid characters talking a lot about their feelings throughout the film. And it's also, I feel, interesting to watch someone, especially someone who's not just lying to the other person, but there's lying to themselves. And it's very exciting. I love characters like that, and I love people lying to each other. Because you just start, in a way, you can, as a writer, you can set things up in this way where you set up a very intense emotional relationship and you go, okay, one person is lying to the other person. And then you can just let the actors do their thing, because obviously as an actor, that if you have a close relationship, that the other person is lying, and they know that and that so it just becomes more and more and more layered, and the scene comes to life in that way. So,
and for you, Lola, what did that kind of playfulness with the dialogue give you in order to be able to bounce off of?
Yeah, I mean, I would second what Daina has said there. Like, it's always great to get a script where, they talk like regular human beings, and, it creates like a base level of truth and honesty in a weird way, even though everybody's lying. But it's there, and, there's so many joyful and playful moments between Zora and Tuesday and their dynamic, aside from all of that, the enormity of all of the emotion that is swelling beneath them. Like, ultimately, like, they're best friends. They're each other's like ride or die, and you can see that in them, and getting to like play those joyful moments. One of my favorites very early on is the Tinder conversation. To me, that rings really true of like a mother and a daughter who have spent a significant amount of time with each other, know each other inside out, and share a sense of humor and joy. And yeah, I mean, for me, that was like such a privilege.
I love all of that. Well, it's genuinely just one of the most stunning and creative films that I've seen in recent times. So huge congratulations to both of you. Thank you. And I love your button, Lola.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much.